Good morning, everyone. This is Shalini Chakraborty, and today we will be learning a very interesting poem, My Last Duchess, an exemplary dramatic monologue by the Victorian poet Robert Browning. But before we get into the text, let's quickly understand a few concepts and contexts required for us to understand and reflect on the poem better. First and foremost, what is a dramatic monologue? A dramatic monologue is a lyric poem spoken by a dramatic persona who is patently not the poet in front of one or more than one silent listeners. A dramatic monologue is usually situated in a critical moment or a specific dramatic situation, and the character in his speech unwittingly reveals some of his secrets, darkest, deepest secrets of his nature, which makes the poem a very interesting and intriguing psychological analysis. Now, Robert Browning perfected the art of dramatic monologue, and he delved into the psyche of real life historical figures, mainly from the Italian Renaissance. He was always interested in Italian Renaissance, and he rummaged through his father's library, which consisted of something like 6,000 odd volumes of books. And he read about it, Renaissance, and he was very interested with the spirit of Renaissance. And to him, Renaissance was this time which combined curiosity and love of great art, great artistic ability with cupidity and a capacity of amassing great wealth. In 1838, Robert Browning visited Italy for the first time, and he kind of felt like he belonged there. In 1844, when he visited again, he got very interested in Italian history, art, and literature. When he took his wife, the great Victorian poetess Elizabeth, with him, she shared his love for the country so much that they decided to settle over there. In 1847, the Brownings went to Florence, which we can call the hub of Italian Renaissance, and the two of them were thoroughly charmed by the city. And it is here that Robert Browning fell in love with Italian art, and he got interested in Italian art history and criticism and started reading Vasari's Lives of the Painters. Now, My Last Duchess can be called the fictionalized history of Alfonso II d'Este, the Duke of Ferrara in the mid 16th century. The Duke was married to Lucrezia di Cosimo Medici, who belonged to the Medici family, a powerful, wealthy banking family that rose to prominence during the 15th century. But no way did they come close to the family lineage or the social ranking of the Este family. Lucrezia died at a very tender age of 17 and under mysterious circumstances. And even though it was proclaimed that she died of tuberculosis, legends have it that she was poisoned by her own husband. The Duke, however, did not take much time to move on and quickly sought the hands of Barbara, the eighth daughter of the great Roman Emperor Ferdinand. Ferdinand II, who was the Count of Tyrol and Barbara's brother, he was handling the responsibility of arranging the marriage, and he sent his chief entourage, Nicholas Madruch, to the Duke for having the final conversation regarding the marriage. And it is Nicholas Madruch who is considered to be who is presumed to be the silent listener of the poem. So without any further ado, let's quickly delve into the poem and read the beautiful piece of literature that this is. So the text begins with the word Ferrara, which gives us a context that we have already discussed so far. The poem was published in Browning's volume of dramatic lyrics called Bells and Pomegranates 3, which formed the dramatic lyric, and in 1942. And this is a dramatic monologue, as we have already discussed, and it looks at the sexual jealousy and the possessiveness that the Duke had for his last Duchess. And what is very interesting to note over here is that the poem has end rhyme, like all the lines rhyme, two lines, every two lines rhyme. But the point is, the lines are run on, so you cannot really read it rhymingly. So what we can understand from this is that the Duke, who is very controlling in nature, is trying very hard to control the rhythm of the poem, but he is failing miserably. So let's start reading the poem. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. So the first word that he uses is that. And even though he's referring to the painting, the way the sentence is constructed, it seems like the word that has been used for the Duchess, which shows that Duchess was objectified by the Duke, and it is kind of true because the Duke considered her to be one of his possessions and someone who is not allowed to have any individuality and is supposed to work the way he wants. And what is interesting about the second line is that he says, looking as if she were alive. The Duke hasn't been able to crush her completely. Her portrait is so alive, it's so lifelike that it almost haunts him. I call that piece of wonder. So this painting is definitely a masterpiece. Now, Fra Pandolf's hands worked busily a day. Fra Pandolf is the painter referred to over here. It is interesting again to note that even though Browning was very interested about the Italian painters, Fra Pandolf is an imaginary fictional character that Browning invents, and he says Fra Pandolf's hands worked busily a day. What is also intriguing over here is how Renaissance looked at emperors who were corrupt in their morality, however, were great connoisseurs of art. And the Duke over here is just another example of such a character. And there she stands. So, referring back to the second line, which says, if she were alive, and there she stands. It's almost like she's standing there. Will it please you to sit and look at her? This almost reads like a command. So, it again shows how controlling and dominating a personality the Duke had. I said, Fra Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance. So you strangers, you may not have understood the importance of a Fra Pandolf painting. That's why I mentioned it. So this line is almost condescending. I won't say almost here. It is actually truly condescending. The depth and passion of its earnest glance, but to myself they turned. So the painting has captured the glance and the depth and passion of the glance in the glance of the Duchess so perfectly that the Duke is feeling a little jealous, thinking that Fra Pandolf has paid so much attention to the Duchess's look that he has been able to capture it so minutely. But to myself they turned. This refers to the portrait and not the person, and that is very interesting because here he puts in parenthesis and says, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I. The Duchess in her lifetime was not someone who could be controlled, who could be contained by the Duke. But when she is transformed into a lifeless portrait, he is able to satisfy himself with this idea that he is in control. So now he can ensure that her eyes always turn towards him, which is not the situation, which is not the case when she was alive. And seemed as they would ask me if they durst, how such a glance came there. So now the first are you to turn and ask thus. So we can assume here probably the emissary was expressing his surprise and curiosity as to how such an absolute lifelike glance came to be in the picture. So the Duke says that many people have asked me such a question before, and you're not the first one to raise this query. And he says, so it was not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek. So we now start to see the Duke's jealousy, and he says that it was not my presence alone that would evoke the blush on her cheek. She was somehow too easily impressed by strangers, and probably Fra Pandolf had given her a compliment or tried to be flirtatious with her, and she was already impressed with all of that. So he says, perhaps Fra Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much. Or, paint must never hope to reproduce that faint half flush that dies along her throat. So maybe Fra Pandolf had chanced to say, give her a few compliments regarding her blush or regarding her skin or anything, and she had smiled or blushed as a matter of courtesy. She thought these things to be courteous, and that's what the Duke did not like, because as a Duchess, she was probably not maintaining the gravity of her position. And such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. So any such compliment from any stranger, any random man would call up that spot of joy that blush on her cheek, and it was that easy to impress her. She had her heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. So she was someone who was very easily impressed. She had a heart very vulnerable to compliments. I won't say vulnerable, but very gullible. She would be easily impressed, and she would like to be familiar with everybody. She did not treat strangers in a completely different way. Or she is someone we can understand who can get familiarized with everybody in a very short acquaintance, and that is not something that the Duke likes. And she liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. She was not someone who would keep her looks steady. She looked everywhere. And sir, it was all one. My favor at her breast. Probably the Duke has gifted her a pendant which hung over her breast. The dropping of the daylight in the west. The bough of cherry some officious fool broke in the orchard for her. The white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech. So everything she liked equally. She was equally impressed by the expensive necklace that her Duke has gifted her. She was equally happy looking at a sunset on the west side. She was equally happy when a officious fool, as in someone who worked for the Duke, got cherries for her. She appreciated that effort equally. She loved her white pony as much as she probably loved the Duke. All and each would draw the same approving speech or blush at least. So she always blushed, and it was very easy to make her blush. She thanked men, good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900-year-old name with anybody's gift. This line we can understand that the Duke was extremely proud, and he believed that his gifts should not be equated with the random gift that some worker has gifted his Duchess, and she equated all of them together, and she did not treat him as superiorly as he would want, and that is something that terrified him, that threatens his position, I would say. So I think we need to stop over here for now. But we would definitely want to continue this and get over the poem. Thank you so much for your time.